Welcome to another Forensic Happy Hour. I appreciate you. I'm Lee Reber, and looking forward to the conversation for sure. You guys know that I'm kind of a digital forensic guy, do that, but I'm extremely fascinated, especially on the cybersecurity, because, hey, kind of everything in the news is about cybersecurity, especially lately, and some of the things that we can. So I'm extremely excited to talk to Lisa Kearney about this type of stuff, among some other items that I think that you guys will be super excited about. So again, I appreciate everyone attending and watching. So fantastic. The first thing that I always do on the Forensic Happy Hour is I say cheers, and very good to have you.
Cheers.
So one of the things, and I do appreciate you coming on. I know it's been a while that I initially, wanted to get you onto the show. To kind of, because I mean, there's some really cool things that you are doing and that you have been doing. But first, I want you to, kind of give everyone really, who's Lisa? Where this start? Because I'm going to tell you something after this that is to me very intriguing. But just where did you start along your journey? And what happened in the middle, and what you're doing now.
Well, that's a great question. And thanks, Lee, for inviting me to your show. I'm very honored to be on today's podcast. My career started out a winter evening in a small town in Newfoundland, and I was cleaning a school board office, working three jobs, trying to make ends meet. And there was this director who was teaching Novell networking, would stay often in, and he commented on, I guess, my attention to detail. And he said, the office is okay, thanks, that's really great. And I really didn't pay much mind to it until he told me about this new opportunity and the demand back in the 90s and what that was like. And so he said the only stipulation is you have to do an aptitude test and you'd have to move to take the training. And I was 200 miles away from the training facility. I was a young mom at the time, married, like I said, working three jobs. So it wasn't easy. And I didn't have, the financial means just to pick it up and move unless there was a legitimate career opportunity there. So I looked into the course. I did a little bit of research and did the application, the aptitude test, passed. Then I applied, and within 2 days, I was accepted. I'd made a decision right then and there that I was going to have a career in computer networking, which later, and that was a heavy focus on security, because Novell was really dealing with military networks, government, and law enforcement in the day. So I moved 200 miles, picked up everything. My husband came with me at the time, and um, it kind of really set me on my journey. But move forward about 3 years later, Novell wasn't really capturing the market share like it should have been. Microsoft was coming out with a personal computer and, created Active Directory. So you had this client server now environment for Microsoft, which made it a lot more user friendly and seem more viable for, I guess, large enterprises. So the market shifted, and I went back and did my computer science. So it was a 3 year computer science degree. And then from since then, it's been, like everybody else in this industry, continual training and learning and certifications and so forth. So I've had the opportunity in the last, 10, 15 years to consult, work in, Alberta, but really working globally for different companies in different capacities across multiple industries, mostly large enterprise, though I would say, and really mostly across all security domains, including cryptography. So I'm very blessed that way, and I think it gives people a unique opportunity to have a different insight into the business when you do consult. So the last 3 years, almost 3 years coming up in April, I've also been focused on our nonprofit organization, which is the Women's Cybersecurity Society. And that's really, it was founded to bring awareness and provide support to the lack of gender diversity and inclusion we're very proud that we've grown so much, and now we have a large network, international network of women and men that support the initiative and really are trying to encourage more diversity across the industry.
So, I mean, again, I really, I kind of, I knew the story, but the fascination to me, and it's, I'm like a broken record on the shows because, the people, the industry, the leaders that and the people that they wind up having on and doing the show, people who are known throughout the industry, didn't start out at all about really, hey, I was born, I came out and I went directly into a CS degree or into some sort of that, and I was just born into this to start. It was always something else, right? Where
Yes.
A long time ago, played professional baseball, then, had a psychology degree and did that. And it's just all of a sudden, okay, I'm going to go into doing law enforcement. And then the fascination was kind of always there on the side of it going, wow, this is really, really cool. And kind of the same way, I think as yours with the network and, I love hearing those things like Novell and everything else because I feel good now because that's of course a lot of people I talk to don't know what I'm talking about. So utilizing GroupWise, I believe it was, and anyway, and so taking that into it, do you think that do you think that? And again, I'm going to just, this is a theory, right? Is that people that maybe have a, hey, I started out, this is what I went to school for, I am going to make sure, and I'm just burn out, versus having that kind of hunger, right? Having and done some other things and see, hey, I want to make kind of the world a better place and move off to this side to better yourself is, I mean, what's your opinion on that?
Geez, that's a really
There's a
great
lot of
question.
questions.
I don't think I've ever thought of that before, but I think you hit on not a problem, but I think you hit a point which really comes down to, I think people that grow up having challenges or not, maybe everything is laid out for them, especially when you come from a small town in Newfoundland, like I did, where there was very bleak opportunities to advance. And I saw this as a great, stepping stone for me to finally stop working 3 jobs, stop being exhausted, and provide a more secure future financially for myself and for my daughter at the time. And it ended up being that I've been blessed and had great opportunities, and it's been very financially rewarding. But just not just financially rewarding, but professionally rewarding, just because I've been able to learn and grow and had so many different opportunities as a result. I'm living in Vancouver right now. I've worked for companies around the world, and I've learned a lot about different organizations and learned a lot about what are the inherent risks, what are the built-in risks. But I think when it comes to people making the most of the opportunity in cybersecurity and just having that inherent passion and drive and wanting to do more to help the industry, I think I would have to agree that it's probably related more to people that come from maybe not a disadvantage, but where not everything is laid out for
Yeah,
them.
I
And
think for sure.
if you move into a career or have opportunities and you have success, then people from that background are going to move forward and keep going in that direction. Whereas maybe others where they say, well, I have lots of opportunities in other areas, so I'm not. It kind of comes back to the problem: too many decisions.
Yeah. Yeah, and I kind of audio dropped out a little bit on there. So I mean, to that point, I think that it comes down to, again, hard work, right? You put a lot of work into it. You've worked really, really hard and to try to bring bring to the table, not only obviously as for yourself, but as it's progressed, it's really become kind of a passion of yours to really empower those that might have, again, like you said, that might have been or have some sort of disadvantage in the industry. And so I mean, what I want to do before I get into a little bit of that is kind of the nitty gritty of cybersecurity. So I'm hoping your audio is back, because I want you to maybe, talk about really the start of how the understanding that you had on the network side has now really gone on to how do we go and protect a network.
Maybe like you as well, Lee. I was working actually, my first job was with the RCMP, so I was working in law enforcement. I was working in a large group, and we were really focused. My job in particular at the time wasn't, the term cybersecurity didn't exist. And my job was really just maintaining the stability and the operations of the network and making sure that there were no interruptions. Even though, yes, we were always concerned in making sure that people had access to resources throughout the land, it was really mostly operational and availability. Like confidentiality, integrity of that data wasn't so much an issue.
Right.
When moving forward, and after I did my computer science degree, moving forward into the 2000s, and then fast forwarding, say, to around 2008, as more people got access to the internet and bandwidth was increased, and access to tools and resources increased, and availability of those increased, we started to see a change and a shift. I'd say around, I did anyway, I'd say around 2004, I started to see a shift in the way that the antivirus vendors were positioning their products, because the majority of attacks at the time were mostly a disruption in the service, and or to prove that you could do it. You could disrupt, or you could take down a site or whatever, denial of service. And people weren't monetizing activity to tech or access to technology through the internet, right? And the growing hybrid interconnected world that we were living in, to really or to make that, or to use that to create weapons where they could actually take advantage of organizations and have a financial gain. So as criminal sources began to create new tools and technologies to kind of take data or to use data and sell that, or to even though it wasn't ransomware back then, I'm sure they still, if they release certain information about a hack or a compromise, then it would affect a company reputation wise. But we really started to see a shift in the number and frequency of those kinds of attacks, around 2004, and then upwards to, say, 2009, 8 and 9, where organizations were starting to change, and they were building out their network from, an internal network to a worldwide global, WAN. And, they were opening up, creating DMZ and opening up their internal resources to the world, with e-commerce, right? And that was growing, and business was growing, and the economy was growing. So what we saw was actually a shift in thinking from just a static, firewall, to the need for, security, incident and event management. How do you actually keep track of all of your pieces of equipment internally? And how do you, keep track of alerts, and how do you follow up on that? So we saw a shift, and that was around the same time also, and back to digital forensics, increase in these attacks started to happen, and there was a demand for, okay, and forensics, and how do you drill down into our workstation, or how do you capture data across a network, and how to do forensics on that. So it was around, I think, 2006 where I did a certified computer examiner course in Texas, and that was my first kind of tipping my toes into the forensics world, but it was really only focused on workstation
Mm-hmm.
forensics at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But when you move forward later on, and now we have this complex world where, at one point, say around 2010, firewalls really just weren't cutting it. There was too many vulnerabilities and exploits happening. And then you have a SIEM where you can actually, have visibility into a network and be able to narrow down in on those kinds of events of interest and do your investigation and bring in the different resources where you could, find something and catch it in the bud. But today it's a completely different world. We're looking at, really hyper connected networks. Large enterprises have, petabytes sometimes of data. And how do you get rid of the noise? How do you create a baseline of your network to determine those indicators of compromise, especially where, um, I guess malware writers or criminal cyber gangs are operating, is that they have all these different layers of attack. And as you know, with the cyber or SolarWinds compromise with the NSA, that is always about the weakest link. And in fact, I think every organization that I've worked for, except for one, they've all been compromised. Well, mostly all of them been compromised, and it's always been through a supply chain attack.
Right.
And so I think the challenge moving forward is that we're going to have to build more robust systems where you automate through AI, not eliminating, of course, the need for human analysts because that's critically important, but also, enforcing policy and getting back to the basics. Because even when we look at, in the last year or the last 2 years, and we saw the increase in attacks with ransomware is the number one issue now for CISOs, hospitals and healthcare, what they encountered in the last year and now with the pandemic and research under attack and the global economy being affected and our national and um, economic security also being impacted. We have to really get back to the basics because when we examine these breaches, uh, for the most part, with the exception of the SolarWinds, I think where I was reading actually recently that they had 1,000 dedicated resources. Russia did on that particular, so it was the long play for that. But when you're not outside of nation state attacks, when you're just looking at, corporate espionage, hacktivism, or financial means to benefit from hacking, you're really looking at almost every single issue when you do the research and the investigation is done, when the forensic report comes out, it's always these, basic controls that were not implemented that were exploited. So it's not like people have to be so sophisticated, the attacks, or they have to have these long play, and sometimes they are, and they maintain persistence for a period of years. And in fact, I think most of us can say when we're in the industry, um, the the compromises that you find, they've been there for quite some time. And in my experience, they've been there a minimum of 6 months to more than 2 years.
Yeah.
That's just from my
So
experience,
yeah,
right?
so if I just go back a little bit because really, everything comes down to a foundation, right? And do you think, I know because your foundation really was necessary, it was maintaining a network, right? Maintaining, and that's kind of how it was in the day, is maintaining a network, either workability, that people are able to communicate, file share, however it's going to do, they're maintaining it because you understand that how that works. But now it's really come down to hardening networks, right? To a point of
Hmm.
usability, just so that the visibility that comes into it. So do you think that having a foundation and understanding really the maintenance or the inner workings of a network, however simple or however complicated a network is would help people getting into this rather than saying, you know what, I'm just going into cybersecurity because I'm just going to be that person who is now going to harden it. I'm to be that person that is going to find those people that are acting it. I mean, do you think that people should have those basics and really, I mean, understand that so that they can see that? Because I agree with you. As little as I know about networks at times is thinking of really, again, you think about the weakest link a lot of times the network is that person sitting behind a keyboard, right? In trying to help them and understand and do that. But again, open ports, looking for all of these that they completely. So if it is that the attacks generally are going to come at this basic level, that people should have an understanding of the basic network architecture first.
Yes, I agree. And I'll give you a perfect example. I was reading yesterday of not, I wouldn't call it an incident, but it was a report here in Canada on top level government officials making a decision to buy equipment from China. And the vendor had a bad reputation. They had a reputation of not only having the ability to capture data and have a back door built in, but also to undercut any of their competition. And so I was reading through, and actually the vendor that they were using was going to be hired to maintain X-ray equipment for embassies around the world, Canadian embassies. And when I was reading through the final response from those in positions of authority, the ones making the decisions around procurement and purchasing of equipment, when called out on his decision to go with this vendor, his answer was, well, and the question was to him, well, why didn't you involve a security analyst? Why didn't you have someone do an assessment of the equipment like often you do, especially when you're talking about connecting to national security networks and dealing with diplomats? His answer, and to your point, was, well, I didn't think that we needed to involve security. And furthermore, I didn't think we were actually collecting data, so we had nothing to worry about. The X-ray machines were not collecting data. Well, guess what? The X-ray machines do collect data. They not only collect and store it, but they also transmit it. And the vendor has a terrible reputation within the industry. And so it comes back to, well, I didn't know. And here are people in positions of power making decisions around things that are affecting possibly national security, especially security of high level representatives internationally, and not having the understanding of basic security principles. So to your point, if you look at, yes, hardening a network, yes, it's very important. But I think more importantly is people that are in positions having to do with a policy in place, especially when you're dealing with critical infrastructure or high risk environments. There should be policies created, not just in industry, but by government in particular, that enforces a security component built in, just like the state of California did with IoT having a baseline security. Well, how can we have, it's like someone said, I was reading the post on LinkedIn and someone said, well, we don't have to worry about nation state actors when we have people in power making decisions like this, right? So, it comes back to the same thing. Ignorance is bliss, not in this case, right?
Yeah.
So I'm still waiting to see what's going to happen in that case. Are they going to move forward with this vendor who's actually, and in particular, this vendor has close ties to the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting that none of this was considered, because when you think about it, I have to question whether or not what were the ethics behind, procurement of that contract and that decision, right?
So, I mean, I know it's been brought up to me by another guest, and I mean, how important is it? It was actually Ali Mellon. So one of the things that was the best exercise was, hey, you know what? Let's bring all these C-level guys in that we're working for, and let's just go for it. And let's just go in, and here's the problem. And how are we going to fix that, right? We have our blue team, red team, kind of these guys in here. We're going to solve it. And we bring these C-level people in, and all they see is, wait, what? You can do that? What? We're supposed to
Yeah,
IPO here and we're supposed to do this. And what? And so, now obviously them understanding, because a lot of times, you have these people that are making these executive decisions based upon pretty not the advice from their security analysts who have done this. It's based upon, again, I always have to preface this by my personal opinion. It has to do with money, and it has to do with these things that are going to drive a company forward, not necessarily what can bring them down. So, I mean,
exactly.
what do you think about, bringing people in, and having that, if it role playing is the right word, is here's the situation. We're IPOing tomorrow, and this just happened. And if you can see the wheels fall off as a C-level person, is that going to help say, well, maybe I should move back and think about that? Because I might say, hey, we're going to make this amount of money, but whoops, I'm now going to be 10 times that losing money, on either, going out the door, or now having to build up the system from scratch.
Well, I think there's actually lots of points that you make. So, yes, it's very important to bring in those top level executives, including the board, and doing like tabletop exercises and demonstrating to them what can be done and how it can be done, how easily and how quickly, right? But there's still going to be a high percentage of those executives because they haven't lived in that world that are going to assume the risk. They're going to say, yeah, but in the interest of profit, we're going to assume the risk and we're going to wait until we're hacked, right? He's not saying this out loud, of course. It's going to be the back room when he sits down with his buddy and says, yeah, that was a great to see that, but I'm going to get a $500,000
Right.
bonus based on the profits that we make in the next
Right.
quarter,
Right. And
end of year. So that's one point. And so you need to separate the people making the decision and you need to remove from them the profit and loss component. Whereas, how do you quantify risk and how you determine, um, you know, going forward with assuming something like that when you know that you've been warned and you've been advised. I mean, I can tell you how many times I've gone into an organization as a consultant and made all these, put all of work for 6 months or a year, put all these controls in place, and finished and finalized this great report with this whole list of recommendations, only to come back years later and find that nothing was
right.
done. Right, and here they're, hiring another
Right.
company, a larger company, maybe to come in and paying them millions of dollars to assess the same thing
Right.
again. And it's like, a
Well,
rat race. It's the loop.
and the
So
thing is, I mean, that comes down to again the human element, which the majority of the time is not the best thing to bring into situations. But it's the same thing. I can put this on kind of a forensic side of it, or put it on to any type of IT. Is that you have someone, a small department, large department, whatever. Things are really don't get done unless something bad happens to that person that makes the decisions, unfortunately, right? So either someone who owns a company, chief of police, someone who can make a decision like that, the money or the technology doesn't necessarily flow downhill to go in. And it's not like, hey, you know what, let's be proactive about this, and let's and now I'm just sorry, I'm shotgun approach to everyone, because this obviously is not every company, but a
right,
lot of the
right.
companies are pretty much just governed by something. Oh, this just happened, and whoa, okay, why didn't we think of this before? And you're like, oh yeah, we've been telling you this for years. So I mean, what's your suggestion to those people that might be watching who might be in a position of of that, say, security, of how can they go and approach this to those people that make decisions without hacking
Well,
their
I will
system?
say that I have seen. Yes, yeah. Before I make any recommendations, I say I have seen a shift in the last 6 months where organizations are trying to take a more proactive approach rather than reactive. But the only driver for that I see, or probably the main driver for that I see, is the frequency and the level of breaches that we're hearing about in the news. I mean, it's every single day. we're hearing about breach, sometimes a couple. And if you look at the U.S. government and the NSA and all of those departments and agencies that were breached, I mean, and the large body and resources that they have to detect and to monitor and to respond to any kinds of incidents, and even to be aware of them, a lot of organizations feel like, even large organizations are feeling like, well, how are we going to defend ourselves? Well, for number one, you can do the basics accountable. You can have people at the top that are sorry, my battery's draining a little bit here. I might have to move my computer.
Good.
You have people at the top that are knowledgeable about networking, that come from a background, whereas it's not so much the executive world, but more of a technical corporate world. 6 months. And in fact, a lot of the roles that I've looked at have asked for senior management positions with technical hands-on skills. So I am seeing a shift towards improvements in the industry where organizations are looking to be more proactive. And back to your point where we get into policies and procedures, there's so much information out there that's free. It's just a matter of implementing that. But you can't, an organization can't implement controls if there's no policy to do
Right.
so,
Right.
right? And so that's a critical component
Yeah, and
as well.
we speak to, obviously, with kind of what, obvious to me is coming from, obviously, the cybersecurity layman type view on the supply chain. A lot of people think about supply chain, a supply chain of people going in and blowing up a oil refinery, or doing something that is it becomes an issue, either to some sort of electrical gas, our grid type of thing. But bring to the
Critical
exactly, we start
infrastructure.
thinking about the supply
Yeah.
chain towards those little pieces and parts that belong to a system that stores data and transmits data and receives data. I mean, to me, that I don't want to say that's a bigger issue, but I again, is this something that people are like, oh crap, maybe we should start looking at that a little bit more of, I know and I utilize this database from this company, and I wind up having this widget from this other company, and I go and I put this in this box again. I put this in this box, and now we're all going to hook up to it, and we're all going to run our network through that. It's not like, okay, I made and put every little bolt and every little screw and every little hard drive and everything else in this little, I built them all from scratch, right? We have so many pieces and parts that go into all of these crazy networks, and they are, I mean, have we ever paid attention to that type of the components?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of organizations where they've just completely lost control of the domain admin account and who has access to that. I mean, really, you need to get back to the basics, which is least privilege, making sure that the networks are segmented and people that only have a business need for elevated privileges have elevated privileges. I think when it comes to being able to um, do assessments of external equipment or resources or entities that might be connecting to your network, I think that that's really important. And it comes back to, um, just the basics. Again, I can't say that enough. When we even examine SolarWinds as an example, so they were an external vendor. They were, doing these updates and maintaining, but getting access to their environment. At what point did SolarWinds actually have the checks and balances in place to maintain integrity of their software?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't, because it was compromised, right? They had this back door. And it wasn't the CISA or the NSA or Department of Justice or anything else, or Homeland Security, that discovered the breach. It was FireEye and Microsoft that notified them. So here it is, you have private industry enterprises notifying the government that
So
they've
is it just
been
people become
compromised.
complacent? People could be complacent, and then, hey, it works. We haven't had any complaints, so we're not going to actually go in and look at our, look at our, compilation of our code. We're not going to go and do all of our checks. I mean, I guess how does it
Well,
happen?
when I think back, and I mean, I haven't done a thorough deep dive on articles here and there, as they come out. And I'm sure there's going to be more released because we're hearing new stuff every day. But when I look at that, I mean, as a director of cybersecurity in a different company, one of the things that I always do when I'm looking at allowing resource or new resource or this partnership for another entity, whatever service they're providing, you do an assessment of them. You making sure that they have this, and this in place, and then you create a policy and a contract, a service agreement, right? You create a contract. You work with legal to make sure, and they sign off on that. There's checks and balances that company has in place. So Wins had something like that in place, but when was it audited? When were they doing dotting their I's and crossing actually, or did they have a mole? Was the person that was in place, like, these are the things that we have yet to understand and learn, and maybe we'll never know.
Yeah.
But when we look at, if they had 1,000, like Russia was reported last night, I was reading, they had 1,000 resources on that particular campaign, then how do you address that? So yes, I guess sometimes people become complacent. Sometimes people put their heads in the sand. I think sometimes people become overwhelmed and they say, well, geez, I can't do anything. And it comes back to sometimes what we hear in the industry, Lee, is there's two types of organizations. Ones, they know they've been hacked, and ones that don't
Right.
know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right?
And so
So, I think the government here in North America, where our economy and our national security is so important, the government needs to take a stronger stance towards building robust systems, or requiring, just like critical infrastructure, like the PCI, payment card industry has a set of standards and controls around if any merchant is processing, storing, or transmitting the 12 requirements of PCI, right? Or 14 as they are. And so when we're talking about critical infrastructure, the same thing has to apply. And we're living in a world which people are making based on maybe private contracts and deals, in basements where billions becoming very wealthy based on these, large national contracts. Things being outsourced to the cloud. I don't know that that's the right when it comes to critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
Of our national assets.
Yeah, and so one of the things that is it comes down to pretty much anything and everything, and I'm not going to be. Well, I'm just going to be. It again, like I said, with the human element that we have, and the human element, we have people that actually are working in this, whether or not they've been vetted, whether they work 20 years there. We always have that human element. So, I mean, is there going to come a time that people are show up to work like they are, creating heroin and drugs where they are wearing their underwear? I mean, where is it? Because honestly, and this is my own personal opinion, it's a human asset that's involved in this SolarWinds. It is. I believe so. I have no back inside of it, but I'm telling you, it's, so that is something that cannot be eliminated, right? When we start talking about the critical infrastructure, I mean, until we're living in, I always say Skynet. I mean that actually we don't have humans that are running some of these systems, which I hope that never happens. But how is it that we go in and bring that integrity, right, back to, because again, it comes down to whether it's a C-level position or where it's something that's working and someone's working hard every day, is that a lot of times money dictates actions or security. And so, I mean, how do we fix that?
Well, if the government creates policies and legislation to enforce certain controls in critical infrastructure environments, then the decision is out of the hands of the business owner. Now, it's not to say that they can't be, is not to say that they can't have tax breaks for doing so, but there should be stronger controls and greater accountability as a result.
Agreed.
I think there's always going to be the human element. It's always about the weakest link. And back to the SolarWinds, I agree. There's definitely probably uh, not just one, but involved in having that, successful attack take place. And I'm sure we'll learn more in the days to come. But I think the way forward is to get back to the basics, have more accountability, remove profit, and look at the long term um, best interest of an organization rather than short term gains.
Right. So enough of the doom and gloom, because I get into that because to me cybersecurity is not only interesting, it's so very important. Obviously, because we're so interconnected, whether it be planes talking to controls, there's always there. I mean, there's everything is connected nowadays, and so if we don't have professionals like you and the groups that are out there to help one advise, help to obviously have and give the basics, help people to grow, uh, you know, the world sucks, right? So let's talk about though something that I think is so very important, and one of the things that first drew me to you was really your outreach, really kind of the things that you are doing to really build up those that might be marginalized and those who can and get them into cybersecurity. So talk about that.
Yeah, so right away, I discovered when I had a conversation with a few colleagues, female colleagues, uh, in I guess, the spring of 2018, was for women in particular, but marginalized groups as well. And I was kind of about everything that was happening and thinking, well, I'm going to do something about this. So, I took the proactive action, I guess, initiative to create a group, and in that group very quickly into almost 300 women. And then from there, I saw the need to create meetup groups and registered nonprofit. But the things that I focus on, yes, it's important to acknowledge the issues and the challenges, the roadblocks, because unless you're wrong, you can't build a solution to fix the problem. Number one. Also, to celebrate the achievements of women and those marginalized groups, because and when you look at the benefits of diversity as an example, so much research that has demonstrated that when there's more women and when there's more diversity in an organization, profits increase tremendously. Problem solving increases and speed up, particularly with more women in an organization. And those are skill sets, soft skills that the cybersecurity industry. And so, aside from, yes, bring more women in, there's huge financial benefit for security. There's also professional benefits because you're learning something new every day. Me, that can bring a lot of joy to your life. Then there's, the benefits of having a large network of support that really and empowers more women and to attract them into the industry. Not only that, when we're looking at national security of a country, when you have more women, then those benefits are also going to filter on down through. So there's many benefits.
Yeah. So as part of that, really, those people that maybe this is the first time they've kind of really, heard about that or heard about some of the organizations. Where can people go to get more information, to become part of this? And because again, I'm telling you what, it's people. There's a lot of people that just don't know where to start. They might be interested. They might have tried and they were pushed down. I mean, where are some places that they can go?
Well, they can go to our website for number one. Just Google Women Cybersecurity Society. We also host every quarter, sometimes a couple of times, getting started in cybersecurity, which examines and explains cybersecurity. It talks about the industry, the key players, talks to different cybersecurity domains, the different learning pathways, whether it be technical, non-technical, talks about salary expectations and how to actually begin and the importance of to move your way forward in the industry. And so our next session is a couple of months away, but it's usually sold out, and we're getting a lot of people registered, and there's usually a long wait list as well. Or about getting started in cybersecurity or just want to know more about the industry, you can sign up for that workshop. It's a workshop on April the 10th, the next one. If you go back to our website also, we have so there's usually events happening every single month. Our next event is actually, which is a chapters event, but the one that's open to the public, the FAST Awards. So to give recognition and to really encourage and empower women and marginalized groups. We've developed security and technology, the FAST Award. And so our inaugural postponed from last year, so maybe because of the pandemic, we're hosting it on February 20th. And so that's free to attend as well. And anyone can join it to cheer in, to encourage ages of their career. And that award is actually given to anyone that's starting 5 years. The stats here in Canada are quite reduced. Of women in ICT drop out in the first 4 years. So I'm hoping that this award will actually help encourage and really look at for those marginalized groups in the industry.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, there's again, first I want to thank you, obviously, for coming on to the show, for one, imparting your knowledge on the cybersecurity stuff, and then also for what you were doing. And I want to thank you. It was great. I'm gonna get teared up here and talk about it, but
yeah, thank you so much. I want to say too, about to launch our website for Women in Cyber Day, and anyone that wants to support that, we have a international petition. We have signatures already on that, so anyone wants to check that out, they can also visit our website and sign the petition that way.
Awesome. Excellent. Very, very good. And shout outs. I always like to give shout outs. Who do you want to put shout outs to? We'll put that all in the feed.
Well, first, you, of course, for giving me this opportunity to spread the word and the importance of, getting back to the basics when it comes to cybersecurity, the importance of policy when it comes to government, moving the way forward and helping organizations from a national level, and also to the importance of having more diversity and inclusion within the cybersecurity workforce. So I guess if I was to give a shout out, I'm going to that are members of our FAST Award coming up next month, and that would be Julia Boswell, yay, and also Harry Ali. I'm so proud of her, and also Anna Matloby, who has early stage cybersecurity workforce women. I'm very proud of them, so I had to give them a shout out, of course.
Love it. Thank you again. Thank you so much for coming on. We'll have to do this again.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You know what?
For having me.
I'm going to have to come to the Great White North, right? Exactly.
Yes, come visit us. It's
Love
right here in Vancouver.
All right.
When the pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I could wind up making it into Canada, right? And yeah. I can't wait for that day. Perfect. So thank you again.
Awesome.
Another forensic happy hour in the books, and honestly, going to the cybersecurity side of it and everything, again, I can spend hours because I'm super interested in it. Because as I had mentioned, having everything so interconnected to that, there's still, being able to go and especially respond to it, on the forensic side, that's kind of where I live. But quite honestly, thinking about how important it is to, one, hard that, being able to go and respond, look for those artifacts, being able to go in and educate people, and most importantly, really bringing into, and, something that as I kind of actually, was getting and thinking about tremendously is the inclusiveness, right? Bringing on, and what, Lisa bringing in, especially with the group, and now bringing in women, those who are marginalized, and bringing them into cybersecurity. Again, the whole thing is about making the world a better place, right? So I appreciate everyone attending. Be back again next year. No. See, it's like the drunk history thing. I start drinking beer, I start, saying weird things. But again, no, next week on Friday, we'll be back. All right. See you all. Thanks.